My family said the table was full this Thanksgiving, but I knew there were 6 empty seats. I thought I was the spare child, the one left out. That was before my grandmother's lawyer called. Now I am standing in her oceanfront villa, looking at a file that proves I was not just excluded from dinner. I was upgraded. My name is Brooklyn Price. I am 32 years old, and I am the Chief Operating Officer for Northwind Ledger. My job is to manage risk across global supply chains. I analyze structural weaknesses. I identify fragile dependencies. I make sure that if one link in the chain breaks, the entire system does not collapse. My family, however, never appreciated logistics. They just liked the outputs. I am the one who quietly manages their finances, the silent guarantor of their stability. When my father's insurance lapsed just before his angioplasty, I was the one who covered the copay. It was $5,000. When my mother's roof sprung a leak during that winter storm, threatening the drywall in the attic, I was the one who paid the roofer. $12,000. When my cousin Chloe needed a new laptop for her community college classes, which later turned out to be the tuition itself, I was the one who sent the Zelle transfer. $2,000. I was the structural support, the invisible pillar holding the whole precarious house of cards together. I never asked for thanks. I just assumed I was part of the structure. This Tuesday, 3 days before Thanksgiving, I was in my car, navigating traffic after a grueling 14-hour workday analyzing shipping futures. My phone lit up on the dashboard family group call. I smiled, tapped the speakerphone icon. "Hey everyone." "Brooklyn?" "Honey," my mother's voice came through, high and tight with a polite, sterile chill I recognized. It was her public-facing voice. "We were just finalizing things for Thursday." "Great," I said, merging onto the freeway. "I'm heading to the store now. I've got the list for my mashed potatoes and the green bean casserole." A heavy silence filled the car. I could hear my cousin Chloe whisper something, then my aunt shushing her. "About that, honey," my mother said again. It's so tight this year. Your Aunt Clara is bringing her new boyfriend, and Chloe's friend is in town, and the table is just packed." I gripped the steering wheel. I knew that dining table. It was a solid mahogany monstrosity my father had bought 20 years ago. It seated 12, easily, without the extensions. "Mom, that's fine. I can bring a folding chair. Or we can eat in shifts," I offered, already feeling that familiar cold prickle on my neck. "No, it's just too much fuss," she said, her voice firming up, dismissing the logistics. "We just figured, since you're always so busy with work anyway, let's just plan on doing a big thing next year." "Okay, we'll see you at Christmas." The call ended before I could respond. Not a question, but a directive. I was disinvited. From Thanksgiving, I sat in the supermarket parking lot for 10 minutes, the engine off, the November rain starting to tap against the windshield. I looked at the woven basket on my passenger seat, the one I'd brought specifically for the produce. My phone buzzed in my lap. A text message. It was from Chloe, but it was not meant for me. It was clearly meant for her mother, my Aunt Clara. The text read, "Mom said just don't invite Brooklyn. She said B looks tacky and brings everyone down. She said we finally have a nice Thanksgiving and we don't need her weird energy." I read the word tacky 3 times. I looked down at my clothes. A navy blue cashmere sweater, dark wash jeans, leather ankle boots. My coat was a simple, well-made wool peacoat. This was my uniform. Efficient, durable, quiet. It was the uniform of the person who gets called at 3 in the morning when a shipping container is held up in Singapore, and who gets called at 7 on a Sunday when a relative cannot make rent. I was not tacky. I was solvent. I was reliable. And I was, apparently, bringing everyone down. I felt the blood drain from my face, leaving my skin cold and tight. I thought of the roof over their heads, the roof I had paid for. I thought of the pictures they posted last Christmas, all of them smiling in new sweaters. While I was running payroll for my department on Christmas Eve, I had been the family's emergency fund, their safety net, and now, the net was being told to stay home because it was tacky. I had spent years being the invisible pillar, the one who absorbed the shock, the one who stabilized the foundation. I never demanded a seat at the head of the table. I just assumed my place was guaranteed. I never asked for repayment for the loans. The lend me till next week favors that stretched into years and then evaporated into silent entitlements. The phone buzzed again. This time, my father. My heart lifted for a second. He would fix this. He was the soft one. His text. Hey kiddo, Mom said you might be busy with work. If you are, totally fine. We have enough seats. So don't worry about it. Love you. Enough seats. The phrase landed like a small, sharp blade. He was not defending me. He was confirming the lie. He was rubber-stamping my exclusion. There was enough room at the table, just not for me. Something inside me, a long, strained cable of obligation, finally snapped. I was not sad. The sadness had burned off, leaving behind a hard, clear, cold anger. I would not argue. I would not beg for scraps. I would not text back photos of my bank transfers. I looked at the grocery list still glowing on my phone screen. Yukon Gold potatoes, heavy cream, unsalted butter, chives. I deliberately pressed the delete icon. The list vanished. I put the empty basket back in the trunk, got back in the driver's seat, and pulled out of the parking lot. I did not drive toward my apartment. I just drove. 10 minutes later, heading south on the highway with no destination. The phone rang again, an unknown number, but a familiar area code, not my parents' suburb, but the coast. I let it ring twice, then answered, my voice flat. This is Brooklyn. Brooklyn. The voice on the other end was like dry ice, crisp, old, and carrying an authority that tolerated no nonsense. Eloise Marlowe, my maternal grandmother. We were not close. Eloise was the black sheep of my mother's family, or rather, the golden sheep who had banished the rest of the flock. She was immensely wealthy, intensely private, and had a rumored portfolio of coastal properties. My mother spoke of her with a mixture of awe and resentment, mostly centered on the fact that Eloise had cut my mother off decades ago for being frivolous. Grandma, I said, shocked. She had not called me in. Perhaps 5 years. I am calling to ask you one question, Eloise said, her voice sharp. Who are you eating Thanksgiving dinner with on Thursday? The question was so direct, so precise, it knocked the wind out of me. I fumbled, the lie tasting like ash in my mouth. Oh, I have a lot of work. Grandma, Northwind is crazy this quarter. I think I'm just going to order in. Maybe catch up on sleep. There was a long pause on the line. It was not a sympathetic pause. It was an analytical one. No, Eloise said finally. You will not. They kicked you out. It was not a question. I did not say anything. The rain on the windshield was my only reply. Your mother always was a fool, Eloise continued, a thread of steel in her voice. She mistakes utility for loyalty. You will not be ordering in. You will drive to Seabright Villa. Do you remember the address? I think so. The place by the point. That is the one. Pack a bag for the weekend. I have a seat for you at my table. And Brooklyn, she added, just as I was about to merge onto the coastal highway. Yes. We have a plan. The call clicked off. I looked at the road sign. My apartment was 30 miles east. The coastal highway exit was right in front of me. I thought of the text message. Tacky. I thought of my father's message. Enough seats, I signaled, my hand steady on the wheel, and turned the car west, toward the ocean. The rain clouds were breaking apart, and the late afternoon sun was hitting the horizon, turning the gray water into a sheet of glittering, blinding light. It looked like a different world. It looked like a door opening. Seabright Villa was not a house. It was a statement. I drove the last mile on a private road, the asphalt smooth and black, winding through coastal pines that smelled like sharp resin and cold salt. The villa itself was set on a rocky promontory, a stark white structure of clean lines, glass, and slate-blue roof tiles that seemed to absorb the fading gray light. It did not fight the ocean. It commanded a view of it. Every window was a floor-to-ceiling plate of glass that seemed to pull the turbulent water right into the architecture. I parked my sensible sedan between a vintage silver Porsche and a modern, menacing black SUV. I felt underdressed, out of place, my weekend bag in the trunk suddenly feeling as tacky as Chloe had claimed. I rang the bell. The door, a massive pivot of frosted glass and dark wood, did not chime. It simply swung open. Eloise Marlowe stood there. She was smaller than I remembered, perhaps 5'3", but her posture was impeccable. She wore simple black trousers and a cream-colored cashmere turtleneck. Her silver hair was cut in a sharp, elegant bob. She wore no jewelry except for a severe-looking watch. A faint, mischievous smile played on her lips. "Brooklyn," she said, her voice dry. "You are 30 minutes late. I expected you in 20. I'm sorry. Grandma, I hit some traffic leaving the city." She waved a dismissive hand. "Excuses. Come in. You look like you've been run over by their mediocrity." She led me through an entryway that felt more like a modern art gallery than a hall. The floors were polished concrete, warmed by unseen heat. The walls were white, punctuated by single, large, challenging pieces of abstract art. The main living area was dominated by a fireplace that was nothing more than a long ribbon of flame set into a black marble wall. But the real centerpiece was the view. The entire western wall was glass, opening onto a stone terrace. Below, the Pacific Ocean crashed onto black rocks, the sound a deep percussive rhythm that shook the air. "You weren't excluded from dinner, Brooklyn," Eloise said, turning to face me, her eyes pinning me in place. "You were upgraded." The dining table was already set. It was a long, narrow plank of dark, reclaimed wood, set for only two. The settings were minimalist, heavy linen placemats, stark white plates, a single, heavy set of silver, no fussy centerpieces, no piles of food. A man in a simple white chef's jacket, who I hadn't even seen, placed a small, perfectly roasted game hen in front of each of us, alongside a mound of wild rice and roasted asparagus. It was the antithesis of my mother's chaotic, overstuffed buffet. It was precise, elegant, and intentional. We ate in silence for a few minutes. The only sounds the clink of silver on porcelain and the roar of the ocean outside. "Your mother loves the performance of abundance," Eloise said, as if reading my thoughts. "She always confuses more with better. It's a critical flaw in a person. It makes them sloppy." "She said the table was full," I murmured, the words still stinging. "The table is always full when you're afraid of who might show up and claim their due." Eloise took a delicate sip of water. "Which brings us to the plan." She gestured to the empty seat beside me. A thick cream-colored envelope sat on the placemat. My name was written on it in severe, black calligraphy. I opened it. It was not a letter. It was an invitation. It read, "You are cordially invited to a Thanksgiving Day brunch at Seabright Villa, 10 o'clock in the morning." At the bottom, embossed in gold foil, was a simple, stark logo, the Marlowe Foundation. "I don't understand," I said. "A brunch on Thanksgiving morning, who is coming?" "A few partners from the foundation, some local council members, a journalist I respect." She leaned forward, her eyes bright with a strategist's fire. "And I suspect, your parents and your cousin, once they hear about it—" "But why to make them jealous?" Eloise let out a short, sharp laugh. "Jealousy is a child's emotion. Brooklyn, this is about restructuring. When someone excludes you, you do not beg for a seat at their rickety, overcrowded table. You build a new one, a better one, and you make them watch as you host a party they cannot attend, sponsored by a name they cannot touch." My gaze drifted from the invitation to the wall behind her. There was a single, framed photograph in the minimalist room. It was an old black and white, showing a much younger Eloise, perhaps in her 30s, standing on a dock next to a sailboat. Her arm was around a young boy, maybe 10 or 11 years old. He was smiling, holding a fishing rod. It was not my father. I had no idea who it was. Eloise saw me looking. "That was a long time ago, before I learned the value of cutting losses." She did not elaborate. The mystery hung in the air, another piece of a puzzle I was only just realizing existed. She pushed her plate away, her meal half-eaten. The chef appeared, cleared both our plates, and vanished. Your problem, Brooklyn, is that you have been acting as an unsecured lender to a failing enterprise, Marlowe Holdings, she said, naming her own legendary investment firm. Did not get where it is by ignoring bad debt. We practice the art of capital preservation. She gestured to a sleek silver laptop on a nearby console. You are an operations manager. You understand systems. Your family's system is broken. You are their sole liquidity provider, and they have given you zero equity. In fact, they have just voted you off the board. It is an astonishingly poor arrangement. She brought the laptop over and set it in front of me. I want you to document every dollar, every loan for a utility bill, every help me out for rent, the roof, the medical bills, the tuition. I want dates, amounts, and purpose. I want you to treat your own life with the same professional rigor you give to Northwind Ledger. She then slid a business card next to the laptop. Avery Locke, Esquire, Trusts Estates. Avery is my personal attorney. He is not warm. He is, however, lethally efficient. He will be video calling you in the morning to discuss your options. He is already preparing a preliminary trust for you. My head was spinning. A trust. A lawyer. Grandma, I don't want to sue my family. Good, she snapped. Suing is messy and unpredictable. We are not suing. We are auditing. We are establishing a baseline of fact. Tell me. Brooklyn, she said, her voice softening just a fraction. Do you have any proof they exploited your goodwill text messages, bank statements? I thought of the years of texts. Can you help? B. It's an emergency. I'll pay you back. I swear. Just this once. I thought of the bank transfers, the memo lines. I always filled out dad meds. Mom roof fix, Chloe tuition. They're all scattered, I said, feeling a wave of exhaustion. On old phones, in different bank accounts. It would take weeks. You have until 10 o'clock on Thursday morning, Eloise said simply. Avery will help you focus. She stood up. The signal that our dinner was over. Your room is the first on the left. Upstairs. It faces the water. Get some sleep. You have a great deal of work to do. She paused at the door, her hand on the frame, and looked back at me. I was still sitting at the massive table, a single, small figure in a vast, powerful room. It is time to distinguish between family, Brooklyn, and beneficiaries, she said. One is a relationship, the other is a designation. Your mother has been treating you like the latter for years. It is time you started drawing up the paperwork. She left. I sat alone, the sound of the surf filling the vacuum. I walked out onto the stone terrace. The air was cold, sharp, and wet with ocean spray. It scoured the smog and the stale supermarket air from my lungs. I looked up. There were no city lights here. Only a vast black sky punctured by thousands of hard white stars. I took my first deep, clean breath in what felt like a decade. The smell of the sea, the roar of the waves, the cold wind on my face, it was overwhelming. For my entire adult life, I had been seen through. My family had looked at me and seen a solution, a safety net, a utility. They had never just seen me. Standing on that terrace, with the cold power of the Pacific in front of me and the quiet, strategic hum of the villa behind me, I felt something new. It was not comfort. It was not warmth. It was the feeling of being seen. And I finally understood that I was not the one who was tacky. I was the one who was valuable. And the audit was about to begin. I slept badly. The sound of the ocean, a restless, churning backdrop to dreams of falling spreadsheets. I woke at dawn, the sky a cold, pale gray. By 7 a.m., I was showered, dressed in my own tacky cashmere sweater, and sitting at the massive dark wood table. Eloise was already there, reading a physical newspaper and drinking black coffee. A laptop was open in front of my seat. At 7:01 precisely, the laptop screen flickered, and a video call request popped up. Avery Locke. I clicked accept. The man who appeared on the screen was exactly as Eloise had described. He was not warm. He looked to be in his late 40s, with a sharp jaw and piercing gray eyes behind minimalist wireframe glasses. His office was a wall of law books, organized by color. "Ms. Price," he said. His voice was a flat baritone. "Avery Locke, your grandmother has retained my services on your behalf regarding a potential intrafamilial debt recovery. I have a hard stop at 7:30. Let us begin." He did not say hello. "Okay," I said, my voice sounding small in the large room. "As I understand it," Avery continued, "you have provided significant financial support to members of your family over an extended period, under various implied and express agreements of repayment, or at the very least, under the assumption of familial goodwill. That goodwill has now been explicitly withdrawn. Is that correct?" "They disinvited me from Thanksgiving," I said. Avery blinked slowly. "That is the emotional context. I am concerned with the financial transactions. In the eyes of the law, there is a blurry line between a gift, a loan, and an investment made under duress or false pretenses. A gift is irrevocable. A loan is collectible. A transaction based on a false promise such as, 'I will love you if you pay this,' or 'you are part of this family if you pay this,' can border on fraud." I sat up straighter. "I never thought of it as fraud." "The law has a precise vocabulary for what emotion calls being used," Avery said. "Our goal today is not to file suit. Filing suit is loud, expensive, and gives the other side time to hide assets. Our goal is to build leverage. Your grandmother wishes to conduct an audit. You are the lead auditor." He shared his screen. It was a blank, complex spreadsheet. "I have created a template for you. You will populate this for the last 5 fiscal years. Date of transfer, amount, to the cent, recipient, stated purpose, proof of transfer, a statement ID or transaction number, and a column for repayment agreement, if any." "Some of it was cash," I said, thinking of the hundreds I'd handed over. "We ignore cash," Avery said dismissively. "Cash is missed. We deal in the digital footprint. Your bank statements. Ms. Price, I want you to log into your online banking portals. All of them. Pull the last 60 months of full statements. PDF format." "That's a lot." "You are a COO. You manage data streams. This is just another data stream." He pointed a pen at the camera. "A pro tip: use the search function in your banking portals. Filter your transactions by the memo fields. Search for keywords. I suggest family, fix, urgent, rent, loan, and the names of the individuals." He continued without pausing for breath. "Next, your communications. You have an iPhone, correct?" "Yes." "Excellent. You will perform a full backup of your device to your iCloud account. Then, you will log into that account on this laptop. We will download the entire message archive. The same for any Android devices you may have used. I am sending you a link to an authentication template. Any text message you use as evidence must be authenticated with a timestamp and device ID. My paralegal will handle that part. Just get us the raw data." I was scribbling notes. "Okay, bank statements, text messages. One last item for this morning," Avery said. "Your parents' home, the one you repaired." "Yes. Who pays the homeowner's insurance?" I stopped. I think I do. My mother said they were in a bind 2 years ago, that the policy was going to lapse. I set up an auto pay from my checking account. I could almost see Avery's mind whirring. "You have been paying the insurance premiums on a property you do not own." I was helping. "You were assuming liability," he corrected. "Please locate the policy documents. I want to see who is listed as the payer of record. If your name is on it, you have a direct financial stake in that asset. It is no longer just a gift. It is a documented maintenance of asset. That is a very powerful piece of leverage." He looked at his watch. "My time is up. Send the initial data packet to my secure server before noon. I will have a preliminary report by 4. The screen went black. I stared at the blank spreadsheet. It felt cold, clinical. Eloise had been silent, sipping her coffee. Now she placed her cup down with a soft click. Well, you have your instructions. The systems at Northwind Ledger are not going to collapse if you take one personal day. I don't even know where to start, I whispered, feeling overwhelmed. You start, Eloise said, standing up. In the archives. She led me down a hallway I hadn't noticed, to a door that looked like any other. She pressed her thumb to a small, dark panel, and it clicked open. The room inside was not a home office. It was a corporate war room. One wall was lined with filing cabinets, the old-school metal kind, but they were pristine. Another wall held a server rack, humming quietly. In the center was a long table with several monitors, a high-speed document scanner, and a professional-grade printer. This is where I manage the foundation, Eloise said simply. My assistant, Maria, will be here in 10 minutes. She will help you digitize. She pointed to the scanner. You get the files? She will scan them. We will organize them. Go. For the next 3 hours, I was not Brooklyn Price, the excluded daughter. I was Brooklyn Price, COO. I logged into my banks, my primary checking, my high-yield savings, my old credit union account. I ran the filters Avery suggested. The results started to pour onto the screen, and I felt sick. Family. Memo mom roof fix, $12,000. Urgent. Memo dad hospital, $5,120. Chloe. Memo. Chloe tuition, $2,000. Fix. Memo. Car repair. Dad, $800. Rent. Memo. Aunt Clara rent help, $1,500. On and on it went. A steady, relentless drain. A death by 1,000 paper cuts. Except the cuts were for hundreds and thousands of dollars. Maria arrived, a quiet woman in a gray suit, and she wordlessly began organizing the PDFs I downloaded, renaming them according to Avery's template. Then I logged into my iCloud. The message archive was massive. I started with my mother. I scrolled back through years of I love you, honey, and can you pick up milk, until I found the cluster of texts around the roof repair. Mom, honey, the roofer's estimate is $12,000. It's an emergency. Me 12. Mom, that's huge. Can Dad's insurance help, Mom? You know he doesn't have that kind of coverage. Please, B, the rain is coming in. Me, okay, I'll transfer it. Send me the invoice. The invoice was attached. I opened the PDF, and I saw it. The contact name on the bill was my mother, listed as the owner. The billing address, however, was not her house. It was my apartment address. She had given the roofer my address for payment, without telling me. She had positioned me as the client, not the helper. Then I checked my text messages with my father. They were mostly bland. How's work? Go team. But I found one from 6 months ago, after I sent him the $800 for his car. Dad, thanks, kiddo. You saved me. I'll pay you back next time I get a good commission. He had never paid me back. It was a clear, express promise of repayment. It was not a gift. It was a defaulted loan. But the worst came from an archive I had forgotten my old Android phone. The backup was messy, but Maria's software sorted it. I found a group chat between my mother and my Aunt Clara, one I was clearly not meant to be in. It was from 2 years ago, right around the time I paid the insurance premium. Aunt Clara, are you sure Brooklyn will cover it? It's over $3,000 for the year. Mom, don't worry. I'll just tell her it's helping the family. She'll pay. She always does. She likes being the savior. I put the phone down on the table. My hands were shaking. She likes being the savior. All this time, I thought I was being supportive. I thought I was being a good daughter, a good niece, a good cousin. But in their eyes, I was just playing a role they had assigned me, a role I was apparently desperate to keep. They didn't just exclude you, Eloise said, her voice quiet. She had been reading over my shoulder. They wrote you into their budget as income gullible. I felt a hot tear of rage and humiliation slide down my cheek. I wiped it away, angry at my own weakness. Avery is right, I said, my voice hard. We build leverage. We worked through lunch. By 4 p.m., we had a dossier, a fully itemized, cross-referenced, and authenticated record of my family's financial exploitation. The total, over 5 years, was $94,600. I stared at the number at the bottom of the spreadsheet. It was almost a year of my post-tax salary. Avery called back at 4:05. "This is," he said, and he almost sounded impressed. "A remarkably clean data set. The text message from the mother to the aunt is particularly damning. It establishes intent." "So, what's next?" I asked. "Do we send them a demand letter?" "No," Avery said. "A demand letter triggers panic. We do not want panic. We want control. You have a brunch on Thursday. You will not mention this. You will not accuse. You will simply exist, successfully, in their presence. The file is our leverage, held in reserve. We will use it only when it has maximum impact." "So I do nothing." "You do nothing," Avery confirmed. "For now, you let them walk into the room you built. We have the facts. Now, we wait for the emotional context to shift in our favor." The call ended. I felt drained, hollowed out, but also strangely light. The invisible weight of $94,000 of resentment had been lifted. It was no longer a vague, swirling fog of, "they use me." It was a number. It was a fact. Eloise closed the laptop. "You did well, Brooklyn." She walked me out of the archive room and back into the main living area. The sun was setting, turning the ocean into a violent, beautiful canvas of orange and purple. "I know what you're thinking," Eloise said, standing by the massive glass window. "You're thinking this is cruel. You're thinking this is not what a family does." "It's not," I said. "It's cold." "It is precise," she corrected. "Let me tell you a story. When I was 28, I was engaged to a man my parents despised, a lovely man, but he had no money. His family was new money, and mine was old. My parents' circle excluded me from everything. The final straw was my own cousin's engagement party. I was explicitly told not to come. It would be uncomfortable for everyone." She looked out at the water, her memory 1,000 miles away. I was heartbroken. I cried for a day. On the second day, I sold the trust fund jewelry my grandmother had left me. On the third day, I used that money, and a substantial loan, to buy the small boutique hotel where the party was being held. My jaw dropped. "You bought the hotel." "I bought the hotel," she said, a small, dangerous smile on her face. The party went on as scheduled. I did not attend. I simply sat in the owner's office, reviewing the catering receipts. I approved the champagne they drank. I approved the cost of the flowers they sniffed. And when it was over, I sent my cousin a bill for the entire event, with a 30% family discount. She turned to look at me, her eyes clear. "This is not petty revenge. Brooklyn, this is about reclaiming your value. They think you are a utility. You are about to show them that you are the one who owns the power plant. You are not tacky. You are not bringing them down. You are the asset they foolishly, stupidly discarded. And now," she said, gesturing to the file we had just built, "we know exactly what you are worth." I looked at her, and for the first time all day, I smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was a smile of recognition. The pillar was done holding up the roof. The pillar was about to walk out of the building. The day before Thanksgiving was a new kind of quiet, in the archive room at Seabright, which I now thought of as the war room. I nursed a cup of black coffee and monitored the digital front. It did not take long for the first shot to be fired. My cousin Chloe posted on Instagram just before noon. The photo was of my mother, beaming, placing a gaudy, turkey-shaped centerpiece on the infamous mahogany dining table. The caption was the real weapon. "So excited for tomorrow. Just a small, cozy gathering this year. So thankful we have just enough seats for the real family. Blessed Thanksgiving family first. Real family, a week ago." That caption would have shattered me. I would have called my mother, crying, begging to know what I did wrong. But now, sitting in a climate-controlled room with a $94,000 spreadsheet of evidence open on the laptop. The words felt different. They were not just an emotional slight. They were a tactical blunder. They were proof of intent. I looked at the post, at the smug hashtag, and I felt nothing but a cold, clean clarity. I navigated to our family group chat. My fingers were steady on the screen. "Looks lovely," I typed. "I am tied up with a big project this weekend anyway. Hope you all have a warm and cozy holiday." I did not mention being excluded. I did not mention the lie about enough seats. I simply opted out of a game I was never meant to win. Eloise, reading over my shoulder, nodded once. "Good, civil, detached. You mentioned a project. It implies you have bigger concerns. It makes them small." She then turned to her own phone and made a call. "Maria? Yes, I want the brunch invitation sent, the heavy cream cardstock, the one with the Marlowe Foundation embossing. Have the courier deliver them by hand. I want a signature. Yes, 3 separate envelopes to that address. One for Mr. and Mrs. Price, Mont, and one specifically for Ms. Chloe Miller." She hung up. "You cannot fight a social media insult with a text message," she said, arranging a single white orchid in a vase on the table. "You fight it with embossed cardstock. You fight it with a level of status they cannot replicate or ignore." 2 hours later, my phone began to vibrate violently on the desk. My mother. I let it go to voicemail. The message that followed was a masterclass in feigned confusion. "Brooklyn. Honey, I just received the strangest thing, an invitation, from your grandmother, for a brunch tomorrow. At Seabright Villa. I did not even know she was in town. It is so formal. Are you with her? Call me back. Sweetie, this is just so confusing." Her voice was laced with a sickly, artificial sweetness, the kind she used when she wanted something she did not deserve. A moment later, a text from my father. "Mom got a fancy card. What's going on? B. Where are you?" I replied to the group, keeping my tone consistent. "I'm fine. I'm helping Grandma Eloise with a foundation project." The response was immediate. This time, a private message. Just from Chloe, the first crack in their alliance. "Hey, so that invite is like super legit. The guy who dropped it off was in a uniform. Is it a huge party? Is it catered? If there's room, save me a spot." LOL. Mom is acting really weird about it. I stared at her message. This was the same person who, 48 hours ago, had accidentally texted me that I was tacky and had weird energy. Now, sniffing a better offer. She was looking for an escape hatch. I did not reply to her. The silence was my answer. "They are hooked," Eloise said. She was reviewing a list on her own laptop. "What list is that?" I asked. "The guest list for tomorrow. This is not just about them. Brooklyn, this is about your audience. A proper audit requires witnesses." She turned the screen toward me. It was not a long list, but it was heavy. "Dr. Aris," she said, pointing to the first name. "He runs the largest community housing fund on the coast. The Marlowe Foundation is his primary benefactor. He needs to see who you are." "Sylvia Rourke," she continued. "She is the senior food and culture editor for the Coastal Times. She believes she is coming to profile the Foundation's philanthropic efforts. She will, instead, be observing a masterclass in boundaries. She is a storyteller. And Mr. James," she tapped the last name, "a photographer. He specializes in candid corporate event photography. He knows how to capture leverage without being intrusive. He is our documentarian." I felt a chill. This was not a brunch. It was a corporate restructuring, disguised as a party. The laptop chimed. Avery Locke, requesting a video call. This time, he was not in his office. He was in a car, the image grainy. "Ms. Price, Ms. Marlowe," he said, his voice crisp. "I have reviewed the file. The $94,000 figure is solid. Given the evidence, particularly the fraudulent inducement regarding the roof repairs and your direct payment of the homeowner's insurance, we have clear grounds to place a lien on the property." "I do not want their house," I said immediately. The thought made me sick. Of course not, Eloise said, cutting in. She does not want their house. She wants them to understand the cost of what they did. We need a public move, Avery, not a private suit. I agree, Avery said. He seemed to be anticipating this. A lawsuit is messy. A public display of reallocation is cleaner. I spoke with the Marlowe Foundation's board this afternoon. I propose we use the brunch to announce the establishment of a new vocational scholarship fund. I frowned. What does that have to do with me? We will call it, Avery said, consulting his notes, the Brooklyn Price Vocational Building Grant. I stopped breathing. My name. Yes, Eloise said, a fierce, proud look in her eyes. It is perfect. You spent $94,000 to repair one roof for people who are ungrateful. We will announce that you are now endowing a fund to build new roofs for people who are deserving. We are merely redirecting your future investment into something that appreciates. Avery nodded. It reframes you. Ms. Price, you are not a victim. You are a philanthropist. The foundation will handle the press release. We will announce the inaugural grant. It makes your family's petty exclusion look exactly like what it is, a poor financial decision. They called me tacky. My name was now going on a grant. Avery signed off, and I was left staring at the embossed invitation on the table. My phone rang again. My mother. This time, I knew I had to answer. I put it on speaker. Hi, Mom? My voice was steady, neutral, the voice of a COO. Brooklyn finally. Her voice was a high-pitched performance of relief. Honey, what is going on? Your grandmother just invites us. After all these years, we have not seen her since your high school graduation, and you are there. You did not tell me you were seeing her. The accusation was wrapped in sugar. You betrayed me by aligning with her. I was busy with work. Remember, I said, using the same polite, flat tone. Grandma called. She needed my help with a charity event. It was last minute. A pause. She was processing the new power dynamic. A charity event at the villa. Oh, well, are we supposed to bring something I can make my green bean casserole, the one you like? The offer was a pathetic, transparent attempt to regain her territory, to insert her cozy family brand into Eloise's world. No, Mom, that is not necessary. The event is fully catered, I said. Just come at 10, if you want. The silence on the other end was heavy, cold. I had just refused her currency. Well, she said finally, her voice tight. All right, it just seems very sudden. We are very excited to see you. Your father is confused, but we will be there. She hung up without saying I love you. A minute later, a separate text message came through. From my father. I need to talk to you, it read. Not on the phone, after the holiday. It's important. About things. I showed the message to Eloise. He is signaling, she said. He knows your mother's plan to cut you out was the proximal cause. He is trying to distance himself, to create plausible deniability. He is a coward, but he is a conflicted one. She stood and walked to the massive window, looking out at the dark, churning water. They will be disorganized tomorrow. Your mother will try to take center stage, to perform the role of the proud, loving matriarch. Your father will look for an exit. Your cousin will look for an opportunity. They are predictable. What do I do? I asked. When they get here, do I show them the file? Absolutely not, Eloise said. Do not charge in. Do not wave your file of receipts in their faces. You let them walk onto this terrace. You let them see the life you have access to without them. You let them see the people who respect you. Let them be the ones who feel out of place. Let them be the ones who look tacky. She turned to me. Your power tomorrow is not in what you say. It is in what you no longer need to do. You do not need to please them. You do not need to manage their feelings. You just need to be. That night, before I went to bed, I went back to the archive room. I took 2 empty cream-colored manila folders from the desk. With a black marker, I wrote on the first tab, Gratitude. Inside, I placed the printout of Avery's proposal for the Brooklyn Price Vocational Building Grant. On the second folder, I wrote Boundaries. Inside, I placed the $94,000 spreadsheet, the printout of my mother's text to my aunt, and the copy of Avery's preliminary lien warning. I placed them side by side on the polished desk, a binary choice. One was the future, the other was the past. Tomorrow, my family would arrive for brunch, and they would have to decide which folder we were going to open. I spent most of Wednesday night in the war room. Sleep was impossible. The $94,000 spreadsheet was a fact, but it was not a story. It was a list of grievances. It lacked impact. I am a chief operating officer. I do not win arguments by showing spreadsheets to board members. I win them by showing presentations that make the data undeniable. I opened the laptop and started a new file. My family, particularly my mother, operates on emotion and plausible deniability. I was about to introduce them to visual aids and a clear, documented timeline. The first slide was simple. A title in a clean, sans serif font. The Price Family Ledger. A 5-year review. The second slide was the roof. I scrolled through my phone's photo backups, my digital life archived in the cloud. I found what I was looking for. A photo I had taken 2 winters ago, a close-up of my childhood bedroom ceiling, a dark, ugly water stain spreading from the corner. Underneath it, I typed, before, stated emergency. Next to it, I placed the photo my mother had texted me a month later. After the work was done, it was a proud, sunny shot of the new, dark gray shingles. After, cost $12,000, paid by Brooklyn Price. The third slide was my father's health. Before, I inserted a screenshot of his text message, kiddo. The copay for the procedure is just too much right now. I guess I'll have to wait. Next to it, after, a scanned PDF of the hospital bill, stamped paid in full, with the charge clearly marked on my Amex statement, cost $5,100. I did the same for Chloe's $2,000 of tuition, which I now knew was just a slush fund. The fourth slide was the one that made my hands shake. It was a simple flowchart, the kind I use to explain supply chain failures. It was one large box, labeled Brooklyn's income, with a dozen red arrows flowing outward. The arrows pointed to smaller boxes: Dad's medical, Mom's roof, Chloe's education, Aunt Clara's rent, utility bills. From those smaller boxes, there were no arrows pointing back. It was a one-way system, a broken loop, the final slide. I stared at the blank white screen. I thought about recording a voiceover, a cold recitation of the facts, but I did not. That was still asking them to listen. Instead, I typed a single sentence in the center of the screen. Assistance is a choice, not an entitlement. I saved the file as Appendix Boundaries, PPEX, and dragged it into the folder Avery had created. I leaned back, rubbing my eyes. The sun was not even up yet. I had been working all night, fueled by a cold, precise rage. A soft knock came at the door. It was Eloise, holding 2 cups of coffee. She was already fully dressed in dark gray wool trousers and a crisp white shirt. Avery is preparing the non-litigious demand letter, she said, placing a cup in front of me. It will be ready to send by noon, should you need it. It offers them a choice, a private repayment plan or public acknowledgement and apology. She looked at the screen. She saw the flowchart. She saw the before and after photos. This is good, she said, her voice registering approval. You have translated their emotional manipulation into a business report. It is a language they cannot argue with. But, Brooklyn, this is only defense. She sat down, her posture perfect. A good strategy is not just about building walls. It is about opening new doors for yourself, doors they cannot access. You cannot let this fight, even a winning one, become your entire life. You must build the after. She opened her own laptop. I have already taken the liberty. She turned the screen. It was an email she had sent an hour ago, at 4 a.m., to Dr. Aris, Marlowe Foundation Board. CC Brooklyn Price. Subject Introduction. Advisor for Sustainable Housing. Dr. Aris. This is my granddaughter. Brooklyn Price. Whom I spoke of. She is the COO at Northwind Ledger, specializing in complex supply chain logistics. I believe her expertise would be invaluable in solving the procurement and materials management issues for our sustainable housing initiative. I am formally recommending her for the open advisory position on the project board. Brooklyn. Dr. Aris is our most effective director. I expect you two to connect at the brunch today. Surprise number 2. It was not a question. It was a coronation. Eloise was not just giving me a seat at her table. She was giving me a seat at the table. Before I could fully process what a board advisory role meant, a new email hit my inbox. This one was a forward. From Eloise to me. From Zephyr Bay Council, Office of Storm Preparedness. Subject FDOD consultation request. Stormproof roofing initiative. The email was dense, full of council jargon, but the summary was clear. The city was launching a new initiative to stormproof homes in low-income coastal areas. They were seeking a professional logistics consultant to design and manage the procurement and deployment of materials, to prevent the kind of fraud and waste that plagued disaster relief programs. You see, Eloise said, sipping her coffee, you paid $12,000 to fix one roof for people who called you tacky. The Zephyr Bay Council wants to pay you to manage a program that will fix 500 roofs for people who will be grateful. I stared at the 2 emails, the board seat, the consulting offer. My career, which I had so often put on hold to answer my family's emergency calls, was suddenly, breathtakingly, accelerating. It was happening, almost instantly, because I had finally stopped managing their lives and started managing my own. I picked up a pen and a blank sheet of paper from the desk. I wrote at the top, Lessons learned. My first note, allowing your kindness to be debited does not make you a good person. It just impoverishes both parties. You become hollow, and they become entitled. I felt a sudden, sharp lightness. I was not a victim. I was just a bad investor, and I was finally rebalancing my portfolio. It was 7 a.m., Thanksgiving Day. The house was quiet, save for the distant, professional clinking of the catering team setting up on the terrace. The sky was a clear, sharp blue. Then, the doorbell, that same soft chime. It was not a guest. It was a courier. Just as before, he held a thick, legal-sized flat-pack envelope. For Mr. Avery Locke, care of Eloise Marlowe, he said. Eloise signed the digital scanner. She took the envelope and placed it on the table. What is that? I asked, my stomach tightening. Standard procedure, Eloise said, using a silver letter opener to slit the top. Avery ran a full title search on your parents' property yesterday. When an asset is this central to a dispute, you must check for other liens. My phone buzzed. A video call from Avery. He was in his office, wearing a tie. Ms. Marlowe, Ms. Price, he said. You have the package. We are opening it now, Eloise said, spreading the thick documents on the table. It was dense, pages of legal descriptions, assessor's maps, and filing numbers. I do not understand any of this, I said. Allow me to translate, Avery said, his voice flat. Look at Section 4B, the lien holder records. As expected, there is the primary mortgage, held by the bank, but there is a second filing, a secondary lien. A second mortgage, I said. My parents took out a second mortgage, a home equity line of credit, technically, Avery said. For $15,000, Eloise's eyes scanned the page. Look at the date, Brooklyn. I found the filing date. It was dated just 6 weeks ago. It was dated 2 weeks after my $12,000 transfer had cleared, and 1 week after the roofer had certified the work complete. My blood turned to ice. They waited, I whispered. They waited until the house was repaired, until I had restored its value. Precisely, Avery said. You did not just pay for their roof. You paid to increase their home's equity, and the moment the appraisal reflected that new value, your mother, as the sole signatory, took out a loan against it. I felt the air leave my lungs. This was not negligence. This was not a desperate family taking help. This was a plan. I thought of my mother's texts. The rain is coming in. B, it's an emergency. She had manufactured the emergency, knowing I would pay, so she could leverage my payment for her own gain. Where did the money go? I asked, my voice barely audible. The loan application states debt consolidation and further home improvements, Avery said. However, the bank statements I subpoenaed, which arrived this morning, show a single wire transfer for the full $15,000 2 days after the loan was funded. He paused, adjusting his glasses. The transfer was made to a checking account belonging to your cousin, Ms. Chloe Miller. Surprise number 3, the final, fatal one. They had taken my money, the money I earned working 60-hour weeks, the money I had set aside for my own future, and used it as seed capital to get a loan, which they then gave to the same cousin who called me tacky. This is systematic, Avery said, his voice quiet but severe. This is not a family falling on hard times, Ms. Price. This is a pattern of calculated, systematic financial exploitation. I looked at the documents, the flowchart, the before and after photos, the title search, the bank transfer, the anger I had felt before, the hot, stinging anger of betrayal, was gone. That was an emotion. This was a crime. I had been treating this like a daughter. I needed to treat it like a COO. My supply chain was not just leaky. It was being actively embezzled. I stood up and picked up the phone. I was calm. My hands were perfectly steady. The rage had cooled into something hard, clear, and useful. It had cooled into strategy. Avery, I said, my voice as flat and cold as the marble floor. Please scan these new documents immediately. We need to add an appendix to the presentation. It was 9 o'clock on Wednesday night, the eve of the holiday. I was in the war room, the glow of the dual monitors lighting my face. The final presentation was locked, loaded with the HELOC evidence, the bank transfer to Chloe, the entire devastating timeline. It was a kill file. My phone rang. The screen flashed Mom. I looked at Eloise, who was sitting across the table, reviewing the caterer's final invoice. She raised a single, expectant eyebrow. I took a breath. I pressed accept and put the call on speakerphone. Brooklyn, honey, thank goodness. Her voice was a fountain of artificial brightness, a performance of holiday cheer. I was just checking on you. We missed you today. I was getting so worried. I've been busy, Mom, I said. My voice was quiet, steady, the voice I used for difficult vendors. Oh, I just know you are, sweetie, always working so hard. She chirped. Listen, I was just finishing my baking for tomorrow, and I had the best idea. You know that sweet potato pie I make, the one with the marshmallows? I said nothing. Well, she continued, I made an extra one. I was thinking, why don't you swing by the house in the morning? Maybe 8:30. You can pick it up and bring it with you to your grandmother's brunch. It would be such a lovely gesture, don't you think? To show her we're all just one big, happy family? I almost smiled. It was a classic, brilliant maneuver. She had been disinvited from the planning of this new, high-status event, so she was trying to insert her own brand. She wanted her pie on Eloise's table. She wanted to use me, the daughter she had excluded, as her delivery mule. She was trying to claim a seat, even if it was just a dish. No, Mom, that won't be possible. The fake cheer on the line evaporated, sucked into a vacuum, a dead, cold silence stretched for 5 seconds. What did you say? Her voice was flat now, all performance gone. I said no. I'm helping Grandma Eloise prepare for the brunch. We have a lot of work to do in the morning. I won't have time to drive to your house and back. Prepare, she scoffed, her voice laced with suspicion. Brooklyn, it's a catered event. What could you possibly be preparing? You're just a guest. The foundation materials, Mom, the donor lists. It's complicated, I lied smoothly. I have to go. I'll see you at 10. There was another beat of silence, And then came the sound I was expecting. A short, brittle, forced laugh. Well, aren't you important all of a sudden? Running errands for Eloise? Just be careful. Honey, don't get in over your head. That world, it's not for people like us. Don't forget who your real family is. She hung up. She's threatened, I said to the quiet room. She's cornered, Eloise corrected, not looking up from her paperwork. She just tried to re-establish dominance, and you refused the command. She's lost control of the narrative. My phone buzzed again immediately. It was not a call. It was a text message. From my father. B, I need to see you. Just for a few minutes. Before the thing at Eloise's, please. Tomorrow morning I showed the screen to Eloise. He's panicking, I said. He must know about the HELOC. He must know she's been caught. Perhaps, Eloise mused, setting her pen down. Or perhaps he is just a weak man trying to find solid ground before the storm hits. He wants a private audience. He will try to distance himself from your mother, to plead his case before the trial. I should ignore him. He's part of it. No, Eloise said, shaking her head. Knowledge is leverage. A good strategist never refuses intelligence. Hear what he has to say. But you will not meet him here. This is my territory. You will not meet him at their home. That is theirs. You meet him on neutral ground, a public space, where he cannot raise his voice, and you cannot be cornered. I understood. I typed back. My fingers steady. 7:30 a.m., the Sandpiper Cafe. On the pier. I have 10 minutes. His reply was instantaneous. Thank you. Thanksgiving morning, the sky was a pale, cold gray. The ocean was flat and metallic. The Sandpiper Cafe was deserted at that hour, smelling of stale coffee and salt. I bought a black coffee and sat in a booth by the window, watching the waves crash. He walked in at 7:30 on the dot. He looked awful. He looked 10 years older than he had at Christmas. His windbreaker was stained, his eyes were puffy, and he looked like he hadn't slept. My father, Mark Price, has always been a man defined by inaction, where my mother is a storm of manipulative energy. My father is the vacuum she leaves behind. He slid into the booth opposite me. He didn't buy a coffee. He just sat, his hands twisting a paper napkin. Brooklyn, he said, his voice hoarse. Hi, Dad. You look good, he said, gesturing vaguely at my simple black sweater. The coast agrees with you. I'm not here for small talk, I said. My voice wasn't cruel, just factual, the voice of a COO. You said it was important. I have to be back at the villa by 8, he flinched, as if my efficiency were a physical blow. He looked down at the napkin he was systematically shredding. I saw the file, he whispered, not looking at me. I didn't react. After finding the HELOC, after the final, devastating proof, I had made a decision. I'd exported the entire presentation, the roof, the hospital bills, the flowchart, the text message from my mom to my aunt, and the final, damning slide with the HELOC and the wire transfer to Chloe. I had attached it to an email, sent to his private address. The subject line was blank. I saw the numbers. B, he continued, his voice cracking. $94,000. I had no idea. I knew you helped out. Everyone knew that. But I didn't know the total. I didn't know about the loan. You knew, I said. It wasn't an accusation. It was a statement of fact from the ledger. You knew about the roof. You knew about the hospital copay. You were there. But the loan, he choked. The $15,000. She told me. She told me it was for back taxes, that we were going to lose the house if we didn't pay. And the wire transfer to Chloe, 2 days later. Was that for back taxes, too? He finally looked up. His eyes were red, wet with a pathetic, self-pitying shame. I'm sorry. Brooklyn, I am so sorry. I let you do it. I let you be the pillar. I let you hold this whole rotten house up all by yourself. It was easier. It was easier to let you handle it, And let your mother. It was easier, I agreed, taking a slow sip of the bitter coffee. I was the family's shock absorber. I managed the risk so you didn't have to. I paid the bills so you two could play house. Don't, he pleaded. Don't sound like that. Don't sound like her. Like Eloise. I'm not. I'm sounding like me. The me that's finished. I set the cup down. The ceramic clicked loudly in the silent cafe. I'm not here for an apology, Dad. Apologies don't change the balance sheet. I'm here for information. Why did Mom really kick me out of Thanksgiving dinner? It wasn't because I'm tacky, and it wasn't because the table was full. Why? He stopped shredding the napkin. This was it. The confession. It was the announcement, he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Your mother. She and your Aunt Clara. They've been planning this. For tonight. At Thanksgiving dinner, she was going to make an announcement to the family. What announcement? She was going to announce that she was officially transferring a major asset to Chloe to secure her future. She was going to give Chloe the house. The coffee in my stomach turned to acid. Give her the house I had just repaired for $12,000, the house I was paying the insurance on, the house I had saved from ruin, which they had then leveraged for $15,000. She was giving her the house, I repeated, the cold, perfect, systematic logic clicking into place. The HELOC, the $15,000 to Chloe, that wasn't a gift. That was the seed money. Mom took out a loan against the equity I paid for, gave the cash to Chloe, so Chloe could then buy the house for $1, using my money to pay the taxes and the closing costs. She was laundering my investment. She said it was to keep it in the family, he mumbled, defeated. I am the family, I said, my voice rising for the first time. I was the only one holding the damn thing together. She was afraid, he said, desperate now. She was afraid of you. Afraid that you were getting too powerful, that one day you would send her a bill, she said. She said you were fine on your own, that you didn't need help, but Chloe did. She said Chloe needed the stability. So she disinvited me, I finished, the puzzle complete. She couldn't make the announcement, couldn't give away the asset. If the asset's primary investor was sitting right there at the table, she had to get me out of the room. The sheer, calculated audacity of it, the betrayal was so deep, so absolute. It looped past rage and landed back at an icy, profound calm. I didn't cry. I would not give him the satisfaction. I looked at this weak, broken man, my father, and I felt nothing but a vast, empty pity. He wasn't a villain. He was just ballast. Dad, I said, my voice suddenly quiet. Do you want to be free? He looked up, his red eyes confused. What? This entire charade. She's not just using me. She's using you. She's destroying your finances, your marriage. She's isolated you. Do you want to be free of it? He stared past me, out the window at the gray, churning ocean. I just want to be a decent man again, he whispered. I want to fix things. I used to build things. Remember the workshop before? Before you let her turn you into her accomplice. He winced, but he nodded. Yes. Then it's simple, I said. We don't have the fight tonight. We don't yell. We don't throw plates. That's her game. She thrives in chaos. She wants me to show up screaming about the money. I'm not going to. Then what do we do? He pleaded. We do it my way. We use the light. This brunch. It's not a party. It's a public hearing. You and I are going to let the facts do the work for us. In the daylight. In front of witnesses. He looked terrified. Your mother will. She'll kill me. She will destroy me. She can't, I said. Not if you're standing on the right side of the ledger. She can only bully you in the dark. We're about to turn on every light in the house. I reached into my coat pocket. I pulled out the crisp, cream-colored invitation, the one Eloise had addressed to him. Personally, I had held it back last night. Waiting, I slid it across the table. Mr. Mark Price, He picked it up. His hand, stained with what looked like old paint, trembled as he felt the heavy cardstock, the embossed Marlowe Foundation logo. "She's expecting you to stand behind her today," I said quietly. "She's expecting you to be her quiet, supportive husband while she performs for the guests. She's expecting you to back her up when she dismisses me as dramatic." I tapped the invitation. "This is a different seat. It's at my table. It's right next to me." He stared at the invitation. I could see the war inside him, decades of fear and learned helplessness battling a single, desperate spark of decency. "She's your mother. B," he whispered, a last pathetic defense. "And you're my father," I countered. "You have to decide which one of those facts still matters. I have to go." I stood up. I left my half-full coffee cup on the table and walked out of the cafe. The cold ocean air hit my face, sharp and clean. I didn't look back to see if he followed. I just walked, my footsteps sure and steady on the pier, heading back to the villa, heading back to my brunch. By 10 o'clock on Thanksgiving morning, the gates to Seabright Villa were open. It was not a Thanksgiving of my childhood. There was no smell of roasting turkey or simmering gravy. Instead, the air was sharp and clean, tasting of salt and pine. The sun was high, a hard, bright disk that reflected off the churning surface of the ocean, turning the water into a field of painful, glittering diamonds. The terrace was the stage. Eloise's staff had arranged a single, long white table, set not with pumpkins, but with low, windswept arrangements of coastal grasses, dark green moss, and white, hardy beach roses. Crystal flutes stood in stark, formal rows. This was not a cozy meal, it was a declaration. The guests began to arrive. They were not my mother's boisterous, gossiping neighbors. They were quiet, influential people. Dr. Aris, the housing director I had researched last night, arrived first. A man with a gentle demeanor and sharp, intelligent eyes. He was followed by Sylvia Rourke, the journalist, who looked more like a professor in her tweed blazer, her gaze missing nothing, a few local council members, 2 Marlowe Foundation board members, and Mr. James, the photographer, a man who seemed to blend into the architecture, his camera fitted with a long, silent lens. Eloise emerged onto the terrace. She had changed into a deep navy blue dress, simple and severe. Pinned to her shoulder was her only adornment, a vintage, heavy silver brooch in the shape of an anchor, the new anchor of the family. I stood beside her. I had chosen my armor carefully, a minimalist, wide-leg jumpsuit in a dark charcoal gray. My hair was pulled back. I wore no jewelry. I was not the guest. I was not the helper. I was the COO, present for a project launch. I felt a calm, cold sense of purpose. At 10:15, a car I recognized pulled up my father's 10-year-old sedan, looking hopelessly out of place. He got out, alone. He wore his good blazer, the one he wore to weddings, but it was rumpled, and his face was pale. He walked onto the terrace, his eyes wide, taking in the scene, the ocean, the guests in their quiet, expensive clothes, the liveried staff. He looked like a man who had wandered into the wrong party. He saw me, and his face was a mask of anxiety and shame. He had shown up, as I'd asked, but he was terrified, before he could lose his nerve and turn back. Eloise broke away from Dr. Aris and walked directly to him. She did not look surprised. She looked gracious. "Mark," she said, her voice warm and clear, extending a hand. "How wonderful of you to join us. Brooklyn saved you a seat right here, at the front." My father looked at her, stunned. He had expected an interrogation. He received a welcome. He took her hand and murmured, "Thank you, Eloise. It's beautiful." "We think so," she said. The photographer, Mr. James, who had been capturing the light on the crystal, swiveled. He did not use a flash. He simply lifted his camera, and with 2 soft, almost imperceptible clicks, he captured the moment Eloise Marlowe, the matriarch, warmly welcoming her estranged, nervous son-in-law into the fold, while her granddaughter looked on. It was not a photo of a family, it was a photo of an alliance. My father visibly straightened, a small measure of dignity returning to him. He was a guest of honor. He had chosen his seat. By 10:30, the terrace was full. Champagne flutes were filled. The staff passed silver trays of elegant, minimalist appetizers, oyster shooters, fig and prosciutto tarts. The tension was a thin, high-frequency wire humming beneath the civilized conversation. At 10:45, Eloise tapped her flute with a silver knife. The sound was as clear as a bell, cutting through the ocean's roar. "Good morning, everyone," she said. Her voice, though not loud, carried effortlessly. "Thank you for joining us on this holiday. It is a day, traditionally, for gratitude, but it is also a day for reflection." She paused, her gaze sweeping the guests, landing on me for a fraction of a second. "I would like to propose a toast." She raised her glass. "To those who have been forgotten, to those who have been left behind, told there was no room for them at the table, and who, despite that, still chose to build, who still chose kindness, even when it was not returned, to them." A few guests murmured, intrigued. Dr. Aris and Sylvia, the journalist, nodded, sensing a story. My father gripped his glass so tightly his knuckles were white. "Here, here," Dr. Aris said, raising his glass to me. As the toast finished, Eloise smiled. "And in the spirit of building, I will turn this over to my colleague, Dr. Aris, who has an announcement the Marlowe Foundation is exceptionally proud of." Dr. Aris stepped forward, his manner warm and professional. "Thank you. Eloise, many of you know the work we do in sustainable housing," he began, "but we've identified a critical bottleneck, not just materials, but skills. We can build houses, but we need people trained to build them correctly, to maintain them. We need to invest in the next generation of builders." He turned, smiling, in my direction. "Therefore, I am honored to announce the Foundation's newest initiative, a multi-year, six-figure endowment. It is called the Brooklyn Price Building Skills Scholarship." The name hung in the sharp, salty air, Brooklyn Price. A ripple of surprised whispers went through the crowd. Sylvia Rourke, the journalist, was writing furiously in her notepad. The photographer's lens was focused directly on my face. I had known this was coming. I had helped Avery draft the proposal. But hearing my name, the name my cousin had called tacky, the name my mother had left off the guest list, spoken aloud in this context, attached to this level of respect, and this amount of capital, it was overwhelming. I felt the hot, sudden sting of tears behind my eyes. I blinked them back, refusing to let them fall. This was not a time for emotion. This was a time for strategy. I inclined my head, a small, grateful nod to Dr. Aris. I looked at Eloise. She gave me a single, infinitesimal nod of approval. It was, perhaps, the single proudest moment of my life, and as if summoned by a different, darker magic. The precise moment of my triumph was the moment of their arrival. The great glass door to the terrace slid open, flooding the quiet, refined gathering with a wave of noise. "Oh, my goodness, we're here. We made it. It's just gorgeous." Eloise, my mother, she and Chloe swept onto the terrace, a tornado of bad taste and desperate energy. They had fatally misread the dress code. The guests were in muted, coastal colors, cashmere grays, navies, and creams. My mother was in a loud floral print dress, bright fuchsia and orange, with chunky gold jewelry that jangled as she walked. Chloe was beside her in a skin-tight red dress, her hair aggressively curled. They did not look elegant. They looked, in a word, tacky. They stopped dead 3 feet onto the terrace. Their smiles froze. They had clearly expected to find me, Eloise, and maybe my father sitting alone at a small, awkward table. They had expected to be the main event, the gracious, forgiving family members arriving to bless our sad, little alternative holiday. Instead, they had walked into a high-powered corporate philanthropic press event, They saw the tables of influential strangers. They saw the professional catering staff. They saw the journalist, her pen poised. They saw the photographer, who was now slowly, deliberately, turning his camera toward them. And then they saw my father. He was not cowering by the door. He was standing at the front of the terrace, a champagne flute in his hand, next to me. My mother's face went through 5 distinct, rapid-fire emotions: confusion, shock, deep, profound anger, and then, immediately, the smooth plastic mask of social recovery. She plastered on a smile so wide it looked painful. "Brooklyn, honey, and Eloise," she boomed, walking forward, her voice a full octave too loud. "We just wanted to stop by and say congratulations. Congratulations." The word was a desperate, grasping sound. She had no idea what she was congratulating, only that she had been left out of it. Eloise did not move. She let my mother cross the entire expanse of the terrace, the silence stretching, my mother's heels clicking loudly on the stone. When my mother finally reached her, Eloise smiled. It was a thin, cool, reptilian smile. "Clara." "Chloe," she said, her voice soft, forcing my mother to quiet down to hear her. "You are just in time. We were finishing the announcements." She looked past my mother, at Chloe, then back again. "The table," Eloise said, her voice still a soft, civilized purr that was more threatening than any shout, "is always full, but there is always room for respect." My mother, realizing she had lost the terrace, immediately pivoted. She was a performer without a stage. So she grabbed the nearest spotlight. She turned to Sylvia Rourke, the journalist, whose pen was still moving. "I'm Clara Price, Brooklyn's mother," she announced, her voice dripping with manufactured pride. "I am just so thrilled about this scholarship. We always knew she was special. Our family? We have always been her biggest supporters. Love and support. That's what we believe in. We're an incredibly close family." Chloe, sensing the shift, chimed in, her voice shrill. "Totally. We're super close. Brooklyn is like, always helping everyone." It was the perfect segue. The lie was so blatant, so public. It was an invitation. Eloise stepped forward, her smile thin and polite. "Clara, Chloe, how wonderful, since you are such core supporters. There are a few foundation partners who are just dying to meet you." She gestured, not toward the food, but toward a smaller, adjacent room. It was a glass-walled conservatory, furnished with minimalist white couches, overlooking the pounding surf. "A private word," Eloise said, her voice implying a privilege, not a summons. My mother, believing she was being escorted to the VIP section, practically glided into the room, pulling Chloe with her. She was finally getting the attention she deserved. They stopped dead just inside the door. Avery Locke was standing by the far window, his arms crossed. He was not dressed for a brunch. He was dressed for a deposition, in a severe dark suit. Sitting on the couches were Dr. Aris, the housing director, and another woman, a sharp-eyed board member from the Marlowe Foundation. They were the witnesses. I walked in behind my mother, followed by my father. Eloise slid the heavy glass door shut. The sound of the party vanished, replaced by the deep, rhythmic crash of the waves on the rocks 50 feet below. "What? What is this?" my mother said, her smile twitching. "Is this a meeting?" "It's an audit," I said. I picked up a remote control from the table, the large television screen on the far wall, which had been displaying abstract art, flickered to life. It showed the title slide, "The Price Family Ledger, a 5-year review." "Brooklyn, what is this?" my mother snapped. Her voice was no longer sweet. "This isn't funny. Turn that off." "I will," I said. "As soon as we've reviewed the numbers." I clicked to the next slide. The before photo of the water-stained ceiling. The after photo of the new roof. Stated emergency roof repair. Cost $12,000. Paid by Brooklyn Price. "We were in a bind," my mother said, her voice rising. "You were happy to help." I clicked again. Stated emergency dad's angioplasty copay. Cost $5,100. Paid by Brooklyn Price. Click. Chloe's tuition. Cost $2,000. Click. Aunt Clara's rent. Cost $1,500. Click. The flow chart. The big box labeled Brooklyn's income with all the red arrows pointing out, and none pointing back. The room was dead silent, save for the sound of the ocean. Dr. Eris and the other board member watched the screen, their faces impassive. My father stared at the floor. My mother let out a short, sharp laugh. It was a terrible sound, high and brittle. This is insane, she said, looking at Eloise. You put her up to this. This is family. Brooklyn, you don't send invoices to family. She turned to me, her eyes flashing with a sudden, venomous righteousness. You offered. Brooklyn, you did every single one of those things voluntarily. You liked being the savior. You wanted to help. Nobody put a gun to your head. You gave that money as a gift. That is a salient legal point. Mrs. Price? Avery Locke's voice cut through the room, cold and precise. He stepped forward, placing a thin, leather-bound folder on the coffee table. The distinction between a gift and a loan is often intent, Avery said. And in the absence of intent, we look for patterns and fraud. He opened the folder. This is a goodwill letter, not a lawsuit. It outlines the $94,600 in funds provided by Ms. Price over the last 60 months. It offers you two paths. He slid the first paper across the table. Option 1. A private, structured repayment plan. You sign an acknowledgement of the debt, and we agree to a modest monthly payment schedule over the next 10 years. No interest. He slid over the second paper. Option 2. You refuse, at which point, the Marlowe Foundation, which, as of this morning, has taken a keen interest in the financial exploitation of its newest grant sponsor, will be forced to issue a public statement. A public statement, Chloe squeaked, about the methods used to fundraise for the Brooklyn Price Scholarship, Avery said smoothly. I'm sure Sylvia Rourke, the journalist out on the terrace, would be very interested in the before photos. We would, of course, have to file the public lien on your home to secure the debt, but I'm sure you're right. Mrs. Price, I'm sure everyone will see it as just family. My mother's face went white. The blood drained so fast she looked gray. She had been cornered by language she did not understand. Lien, public statement, fraud. She turned, desperate, to the one person she had always controlled. Mark, she hissed, her voice a strained whisper. Mark, say something. Tell them this is ridiculous. Tell your daughter to stop this, right now. My father, who had been standing silently by the door, looked at my mother. He looked at her not with fear, but with a quiet, profound exhaustion. He had made his choice at the coffee shop. He looked at Avery Locke. Mr. Locke, my father said, his voice quiet, but steady. I saw the file. The part that was my responsibility, the medical bills, the car repairs. My part of the total. I will sign the agreement. I will participate in the repayment plan for my part. My mother inhaled sharply, as if she had been stabbed. Mark, what are you doing? I'm paying my debts. Clara, he said, not looking at her. The alliance was broken. The first rat had left the ship. Chloe looked back and forth between her aunt and my father, her face pale with panic. She saw the room, the lawyers, the board members, the evidence. She saw the entire precarious structure she had built her life on collapsing. I didn't get all of it, she blurted out, the words tumbling out in a rush. I turned to her. What? The 15,000, she said, looking at my mother. You told me not to say. You said it was a gift. You gave me cash sometimes. My mother lunged, grabbing Chloe's arm. Shut up, Chloe. You did, Chloe cried, pulling her arm away, tears welling in her eyes. You said it was a thank you for just being there, for helping. I didn't know it was her money. I swear I thought it was your money. Surprise number 4. My mother was not just using my money for assets, she was using it as petty cash to buy loyalty from her own accomplices. Cash thank yous are irrelevant, Avery said, his voice bored. We are concerned with the wire transfer, the one for $15,000. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a new set of documents. Mrs. Price, Avery said, I believe this is your signature. He placed the home equity line of credit agreement on the table. My mother stared at it. That's our mortgage. That's private. It's a public filing, Avery corrected. A loan for $15,000 taken out against your home. 6 weeks ago, just after my client paid $12,000 to repair the roof, thereby increasing the home's value and securing your ability to take out this very loan. He then placed the next document on top of it, a bank statement. And this, he said, is the wire transfer, dated 2 days later, for the full amount, from your account, to Chloe's. My mother finally, completely, lost control. You, she screamed at me. Her face was a mask of pure, distorted rage. You had no right. You looked into my bank. This is illegal. I will have you arrested. It was a legal subpoena, Mrs. Price, as part of my due diligence in a fraud investigation. Avery said calmly, You used Ms. Price's funds as capital to secure a loan, which you then transferred to a third party. That is the dictionary definition of financial exploitation. The witnesses here, he gestured to Dr. Aris and the other board member, are prepared to testify that they have seen this evidence. My mother was panting, trapped. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a hatred so pure it was terrifying. You were always a cold, ungrateful child, always after everything I did for you. That is enough. Eloise's voice was low, but it cut through the hate like a scalpel. She had been silent this whole time, watching. Now, she stood up. She walked over to my mother, who was trembling with rage. He is your husband, Clara, Eloise said, her voice a deadly whisper. She is your daughter, and for 20 years, you have treated them both like assets to be stripped. Stop turning your daughter into an ATM. The bank is closed. My mother looked at Eloise. She looked at me. She looked at my father, who was staring at the floor, a signatory to her defeat. She had nothing left. No leverage, no allies, no secrets. I'm leaving, she spat, grabbing her purse. I am leaving this circus. Chloe, we are going. Chloe looked at her, then at me, then at the pile of documents. She did not move. My mother yanked the glass door to the terrace open. Clara, Eloise called out, her voice suddenly light and pleasant. You are certainly free to go, but the brunch is just getting to the dessert course. We are serving a lovely lemon tart. You should stay. Eloise smiled. You will want to hear the final part of the announcement. My mother froze, her hand on the door, trapped between her desire to flee and her terror of missing the final blow. Eloise walked past her and pulled the handle for the other glass door, the one that led to the small, private balcony overlooking the cliff. She slid it open. Instantly, the room was filled with the sound of the ocean. A cold, salty wind swept through the conservatory, lifting the papers on the table. It was not a gentle sound. It was the rhythmic, deafening crash of water on rocks, the sound of a gavel, the sound of a judgment being rendered. The wind from the open balcony was cold. It was the only sound, besides the crash of the ocean, that was louder than the silence in the room. My mother was frozen, her hand still on the door handle, her face a mask of pale, frozen rage. She was staring at me, as if I were a stranger, a traitor who had just read her most private, shameful secrets aloud. I looked back at her, the anger I had felt for the last 48 hours, the hot, stinging sense of betrayal, was gone. It had burned away, leaving behind a deep, weary clarity. This was not a fight. This was a termination of a contract. I don't want to ruin you, Mom, I said, my voice quiet. forcing her to strain to hear me over the surf. This isn't about the money. Not really. I'm not charging interest. I gestured to the pile of documents on the table, the flow chart, the bank statements, the evidence of $94,600. I'm not even asking for it all back right now, I said. I just want the truth, and I want boundaries. Avery stepped forward, as if on cue. He placed a new single-page document on top of the pile. This is the boundary, I said. It's a covenant. You will sign it. You and Dad. It states that you will not, under any circumstances, apply for new loans, lines of credit, or any other form of lien against the house until the pre-existing debt to me is paid. You can't, my mother hissed. That is my house. It's the family's primary collateral, Avery corrected, his voice flat. And my client is the primary, unsecured investor. We are simply securing her investment. If you refuse to sign, we file the public lien. The choice is yours. My mother looked at the document, then at my father, then at me. She was beaten. Chloe, who had been crying silently in the corner, took a hesitant step toward me. My mother wasn't looking at her. No one was. She was small, diminished in her too bright red dress. "Brooklyn," she whispered, so low I barely heard her. I looked at her. Can I talk to you later?" she asked, her voice thick. "I really want to apologize. For real. Not," she gestured around the glass-walled room, "not in this performance." I saw her, really saw her for the first time, not as an accomplice, but as a weak, grasping product of my mother's dysfunctional system. "Later, Chloe." I nodded. "When this isn't an audience, we'll talk." She gave a small, shuddering nod of relief and stepped back, as if fading into the wall. My father, who had been silent, finally moved. He walked to the table, past my mother, who flinched as he passed her. He picked up the pen Avery had set down. He didn't look at the new covenant. He looked at the repayment agreement he had already committed to. I have to start," he said, mostly to himself. He pulled his phone from his pocket, his hands shaking. He fumbled with his banking app. "I have that old boat," he said, his voice thick with a shame that was almost tangible. "The one in storage, the base boat, I haven't used it in 5 years. I'll sell it. It's worth maybe 5,000. I can list it today." He was not making a promise. He was making a plan. He was liquidating an asset. It was the first time in my adult life I had seen him take a concrete, independent financial action without my mother's permission. "I'll have the first payment to you by the end of the week." "Brooklyn," he said. He signed the repayment agreement. Mark Price. The signature was shaky, but it was there. Avery nodded, satisfied. "That won't be necessary, Mr. Price?" My father looked confused. Avery picked up another paper. "To avoid any emotional complications, in the future, all payments will be handled by my office. I have set up an automated clearinghouse transfer from your account to a trust account in Ms. Price's name. It will be debited on the 1st of every month. You won't have to speak about it. You just have to make sure the funds are there. We avoid confrontation." It was clean, clinical. It was the perfect, sterile boundary. Eloise, who had been watching from the doorway, stepped back onto the main terrace. "Brooklyn," she called, her voice light. "The tart is being served." She was giving me an exit. She was reminding me I didn't have to stay in this room and manage their shame. The witnesses, Dr. Aris and the board member, stood up. They had seen enough. They nodded at me, a new profound respect in their eyes, and exited onto the terrace. I was left in the room with my family, my mother, frozen in defeat, my father, hollowed out by his confession, my cousin, weeping silently. I looked at them. This trinity of need, for my entire adult life, this room would have been my prison. I would have stayed. I would have managed my mother's rage, absorbed my father's shame, counseled Chloe. I would have let my own food get cold while I fixed them. I thought of all the Thanksgivings, all the Christmases, All the family dinners I had spent eating leftovers, standing up by the kitchen sink, long after everyone else was full, because I'd been too busy refilling drinks, or mediating an argument, or writing a check in the hallway. In every party, Brooklyn, Eloise's voice came from the terrace, her words carried on the wind. There are those who arrive late, and those who leave early. You must only stay exactly as long as you want. I turned and walked out of the conservatory. I left them in the cold wind. With the sound of the ocean and the pile of documents, I walked onto the sunny terrace. A waiter handed me a small, white plate with a perfect, glistening lemon tart. I took it. I sat down at the table, between Eloise and Dr. Aris. I took a bite. The crust was buttery, the lemon was sharp and sweet. I sat there, in the sun, surrounded by strangers who respected my name, and I ate my dessert. It was the first time in my life I had ever finished a meal at a family gathering without being interrupted. The brunch was winding down. The guests were chatting, sipping coffee. The crisis in the conservatory seemed a million miles away. Then, the glass door slid open. My mother walked out. She had composed herself. Her face was powdered, her lipstick reapplied. She looked, once again, like the gracious matriarch. She walked to the center of the terrace. My father and Chloe followed a few feet behind, like hostages. She raised her hand. "Excuse me, everyone." The chatter died. The guests turned. Sylvia, the journalist, flipped to a new page in her notebook. My mother looked at the small crowd. Her eyes were bright, but not with tears, with performance. I just wanted to say something," she said, her voice catching, but not breaking. It was a practiced wobble. "Today has been very illuminating. My daughter, Brooklyn, and my mother, Eloise. They have reminded us what's truly important." She looked right at me. "Sometimes, in a family, things get confused, wires get crossed." She put a hand to her chest. "And I just want to say, publicly, that I am so sorry, that there was any misunderstanding. We are so proud of Brooklyn, so very proud, and so grateful for everything." It was a masterpiece. She did not apologize for the theft. She did not apologize for the lies. She did not apologize for the exclusion. She apologized for the misunderstanding. She was saving face, trying to spin this disaster into a touching public reconciliation. She was trying to reclaim the narrative. The guests, not knowing the truth, murmured sympathetically. She was waiting for me to stand up, to rush over, to hug her, to complete the scene. Family reunited. I did not move. I stayed in my chair. I did not smile. I did not nod. I simply looked at her, my face as impassive as Avery's. I held her gaze. My silence was the answer. It was the one thing she could not spin. I would not absolve her. I would not participate in the lie. The silence stretched. 1 second, 2, 5. It became agonizingly awkward. My mother's smile began to twitch. The performance had failed. Eloise, ever the master of ceremonies, stood up. She raised her coffee cup. "Thank you, Clara. That was brave." The word hung in the air, a perfect, double-edged sword. "But as we finish," Eloise continued, speaking to the guests, "let this be our final thought. Gratitude is a beautiful thing, but true gratitude, the only kind that has any value, is not making other people pay for your life with theirs." She raised her cup to me. The guests, sensing the end, applauded lightly. Sylvia Rourke underlined her final note. Mr. James, the photographer, who had been standing by the wall, lifted his camera. He didn't focus on my mother's strained face or my father's shame. He took one final, wide-angle shot. In the foreground, Eloise, the anchor, raising her cup. In the middle, me, the new generation, sitting, watching, calm. In the background, my father and mother, standing apart, diminished, out of focus. It was a new map. The 3 generations, realigned, the power structure, redrawn and documented. I looked at that final, broken family unit by the door. I did not feel hate. I did not even feel anger. I felt a strange, surgical sadness. The wound was finally clean. I realized then what this was. This wasn't a story of redemption. Redemption implies you get back what you lost. You restore the original, but the original was broken. The original was built on my silence, my compliance, my invisible, thankless labor. This was not restoration. This was a teardown. This was a complete redesign of the family's load-bearing walls. We were finally rebuilding the structure so that one person did not have to stand in the center, alone, holding the entire, crushing weight of the roof. The brunch was over. The guests, energized by the food and the quiet, electric tension, were beginning to depart, shaking Eloise's hand, and now, shaking mine. Dr. Aris was last. "Ms. Price," he said, clasping my hand in both of his. "I will be in touch on Monday. We have a lot of work to do on that scholarship." He called me Ms. Price, not Brooklyn. I was a colleague. My mother, father, and Chloe stood in a miserable cluster by the door. Trapped. They could not leave. Avery had politely asked them to stay for the final signatures. "Now," Eloise said, her voice bright, as if the entire confrontation had been a minor logistical hurdle. "For the partners, if you would join me on the rooftop terrace, the view is best from there," she gestured. Me, my father, my mother, Chloe, and Avery Locke, who picked up his leather-bound file. We rode a silent, glass-walled elevator to the roof. When the doors opened, the wind hit us. It was a solid, powerful force, smelling of nothing but salt and immense, cold distance. The terrace was empty, a vast slate deck high above the ocean. The wind was so loud it was hard to think. It whipped my hair across my face and pressed my jumpsuit against my legs. It made the linen cloths on the abandoned cocktail tables snap and billow like sails. Eloise walked to the very edge, unbothered by the gale. "I built this villa," she shouted over the wind, "as a fortress, a place of strength, but a fortress is useless if you don't pass on the keys." She turned to me. "I am the sole trustee of the Seabright Trust. It manages this villa and the surrounding 5 acres, as well as the community fund for Zephyr Bay. It's a significant responsibility." My mother's eyes, which had been dull with defeat, suddenly sharpened. She was listening. She smelled money. "Effective today," Eloise continued, her voice cutting through the wind. "I am amending the trust. I am adding a co-trustee." She looked directly at me. "Brooklyn Price," she announced. "She will have equal signature authority on the fund and full residential rights to the villa. She, and she alone, will co-manage the assets." Surprise number 5. It landed like a thunderclap. My mother made a small, strangled sound. It was the sound of her last, most desperate hope that she could one day inherit this place dying. "What?" my mother gasped. "You're giving it to her she has no idea what to do with this." "She is the COO of a global logistics firm," Eloise said, her voice icy. "I think she knows how to manage a balance sheet, and she knows, better than anyone, the cost of a bad investment." Eloise turned to my mother, her gaze pitiless. "Which brings us to the new bylaws of the trust. As of today," Eloise continued, "the villa is available for limited, pre-approved community and family events, should any family member—" Her eyes were locked on my mother. "Wish to use the property for a fundraiser, a party, or a cozy family dinner, they must submit a formal request to the board, to both trustees." She let that sink in. My mother would have to ask me for permission to use the house. "And," Eloise finished, "the request form will include a legally binding agreement, a community standards clause." Avery stepped forward, handing my mother a single, laminated page. "It states," Avery said, "that the applicant agrees to respect the emotional, physical, and financial boundaries of all guests and trustees, and that no financial solicitation, in any form, direct or implied, will be tolerated on the property. A violation will result in a lifetime ban." My mother stared at the paper. It was a legal document that essentially forbade her from being herself. She looked at me. I was not a daughter. I was a landlord. I was the co-owner of the castle, and she was outside the walls. She finally, truly, understood. The entire game of power, the one she had played her whole life with guilt and manipulation, was over. The rules had been replaced by corporate bylaws. "Now," Avery said, his voice brisk, pulling his phone from his pocket. "The signatures." He had the documents ready on a tablet. The repayment agreement for my father, the separate, identical agreement for Chloe for the $15,000, and the house covenant for both my mother and father. "I've initiated the e-signature request," Avery said. "Mark, Chloe, Clara, your phones." One by one, they pulled them out. My father, his hands shaking, tapped his screen. Signed, Chloe. Her face blotchy with tears, tapped hers. Signed. My mother stared at her phone. She looked at the screen, at the document that would forever chain her to her own promise, that would block her from ever leveraging the house again. She looked up at me, at Eloise, at the vast, indifferent ocean. She had no moves left. She stabbed her finger at the screen. Signed. "The automated payment transfers are now active," Avery said, closing his tablet. "My work here is done." The tension broke. It was finished. Then Eloise did something I did not expect. She turned to my father, who looked utterly broken, a man who had just signed away his pride and his power. "Mark," she said, and her voice was gentle, genuinely gentle. He looked up, startled. "Brooklyn told me you used to have a workshop," Eloise said, "that you were good with your hands. You used to roast your own coffee, didn't you?" My father looked at me, confused. I had told Eloise that, just last night, a passing memory of a different, happier man. Yes," he stammered. "A long time ago, before, Eloise agreed, cutting him off, saving him from the confession. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a single, simple key. "I own a small commercial property near the old harbor," she said. "There is a 14 by 14 storage unit in the back. It has good ventilation and a reinforced electrical panel. It's been empty for a year." She held the key out to him. "It's yours, for 1 year, rent-free." My father stared at the key. He didn't understand. "It's not a handout, Mark," she said. "It's a seed. Go build something again. Stop being your wife's accomplice and go be your own man." Surprise number 6, the softest, and perhaps the deepest. She was not just punishing, she was rebuilding. She was offering him a path out, a way to be the decent man he'd wanted to be. My father took the key. He didn't speak. He just closed his hand around it, his shoulders shaking. He nodded. Once, a profound, silent, grateful acknowledgement. Sylvia Rourke, the journalist, who had followed us up, pen in hand, turned to me. "Ms. Price, this has been quite a morning. The scholarship, the trust. Do you have a final comment on all of this?" I looked at my family, my mother, defeated, my father, clutching a key to a new life, my cousin, facing a decade of repayments. "At my job," I said, choosing my words carefully, "I specialize in building storm-proof supply chains. We analyze, we audit, and we make things strong enough to withstand the worst, I guess. Today, we just learned how to build a storm-proof way to love each other." Sylvia smiled and underlined the quote. Mr. James, the photographer, who had been silent in the corner, lifted his camera. He did not take a picture of me or of Eloise. He focused on my mother. She had turned her back on all of us. She was standing at the edge of the terrace, a small, furious figure in a fuchsia dress, staring out at the vast gray ocean. She was, for the first time in her life, no longer the main character in her own story. The shot was perfect. The guests left. Avery left. My mother and Chloe left together, not speaking, and got into Chloe's car. They drove away without looking back. My father stayed for a moment. He looked at me, the key still clutched in his hand. "Brooklyn," he said, his voice thick. He could not find the words. Instead, he just looked at the table where the caterers were clearing the last of the plates. He walked over, picked up a stack of used napkins, and put them in the trash bag. I went over and started stacking the small plates. We worked in silence for 10 minutes, just helping the staff, cleaning up the remnants of the battle. It was simple. It was useful. It was the first family thing we had done in a decade that felt real. When the last of the tarts were packed in a box, I handed it to him. "For later," he nodded. I'll sell the boat today," he said. And I knew he would. He walked down to the street, not to my mother's car, but to the cab Avery had called for him. I was alone on the terrace. The wind was cold. I felt the strange, hollow peace of a battle finally won. "You'll need this." Eloise was standing at the doorway. She held out her hand. In her palm was another key, a heavy, old-fashioned brass key, stamped with the Seabright anchor. "That," she said, "is the master key. It opens the gates and the front door." She pressed it into my palm. It was cold and solid. "You have a home here now. Brooklyn, you don't ever wait for an invitation again." I closed my hand around it. I stood there for a long time, alone on the balcony, my coat flapping in the wind. The ocean crashed below. The fight was over. There was no screaming, no accusations. The knot had not been cut, but carefully, patiently, and publicly untied, using nothing but the cold, clean light of day. I pulled out my phone and opened my notes app, the one where I had written lessons learned. I typed a new, final line: family, a place where there's a table and a seat for you. Just because you're you, not because of what you paid for. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know your thoughts. So please let me know where in the world you're listening from and share what you think in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe to Maya Revenge Stories, like this video, and give it an extra boost by hitting the hype button so more people can hear this story.